Talk about Tetairoa McMillan, the tall. Talk about like two completely different players, Luther Burden to Tetairoa McMillan. McMillan for Arizona stuck around. A lot of people thought that he would end up leaving. He would go elsewhere because of Jed Fish heading to Washington. 6'5", 210. You always have good background. Do you have any background notes before we get into his analysis?
Very non-typical player that goes to Arizona, Joe. On the Rivals ranking coming out of Servite High School in California. He's a Hawaii native that played his high school football at Servite in California.
He played with Mason Graham.
Played with Mason. Not only did he play with Mason Graham, he also played with Noah Fafita and the Manu kid that plays linebacker for Arizona as well, number 5. So he had a very talented team at Servites when he was there. One of the few players, I don't know how many there's been, but he was a 5-star recruit coming out of Servite, was ranked as the number 12 overall player by Rivals and a 5-star. So you don't usually say 5-star Arizona football. You might say Arizona basketball occasionally with a 5-star, but you don't say Arizona football ever. So he was a big-time recruit. Again, same class as Noah Fafita, who is obviously his very good quarterback there. Like you said, he played with Mason Graham at Servite as well. So 5-star to Arizona, to All-American as a sophomore. He was a freshman All-American after a 700-plus yard season in 2022. 2023, over 1,400 yards this past year for Arizona. So a dynamic football player who's probably going to have one of the most overused comps out there, I would say. The most overused comps.
Brandon Marshall, Drake London, Keon
Drake
Coleman?
London. It's going to be Drake London because West Coast, 6'5", more sleek and a better route runner than you would think he would be at 6'5".
Yeah.
Like that's going to be the guy that he's comped to 100%. Tetairoa McMillan.
So for those who remember when we did Keon Coleman summer scouting and also during last year's evaluation process, we both were, but I was really juiced up by Keon Coleman. And the same thing is happening here with Tetairoa McMillan. I really, really love guys that are able to move at this size, that do this whole post up, box out, win in the air, jump ball type of a player. Because you know what? At the end of the day, as much as people like to go, oh, N'Keal Harry didn't work. Screw those people. It's rare.
I mean, they're not wrong that he didn't work, but but it doesn't mean that he's them. Yeah,
he also was overdrafted. He wasn't as good of an athlete as these guys that fit the Brandon Marshall, Drake London, Tetairoa, Keon Coleman. He wasn't as good of an athlete as those guys. And he's kind of hurt this prototype of receiver when we have these conversations. But McMillan is everything to that description. He is, as you mentioned, very underrated route runner for a guy who is 6'5" and over 210 pounds. He's able to get pretty cleanly in and out of cuts. I think that his route running is probably one of his strengths because of just how easily he's able to create separation for himself on those cuts for his size. But we know what the biggest trait here, man. It's the play strength. It's the hands. His film is littered with a number of plays where the ball is just tossed up to him and Noah Fafita says, all right, I'm throwing you an alley-oop. Go up and get the football. And he goes up. He boxes guys out and he goes and grabs the ball out of the air like he's about to take it to the rack and he's going to slam that thing home. So I love the way that McMillan plays in the air, and it's exciting to know what he could bring to an NFL offense to be that 3rd and long. We need to get the ball on the sideline, throw the ball to the sticks with 2 minutes to go. We need the ball back corner of the end zone. We're going to throw you the ball. No DBs are going to be tall enough to jump and be able to contest this thing. So that's what I think about Tetairoa McMillan, who is phenomenal in the air.
So if you remember my thoughts on Drake London, I was a big Drake London guy. Really, really liked Drake London. And I think that Drake London showed a lot of science his first 2 years, and I expect him with a good quarterback now in Kirk Cousins, at least from NFL standards, to potentially break out and be the guy that we think that he can be still, because he's still a younger guy. There is a cautionary tale, though, here, Joe, because you're right. Just because there have been failures in the past, and N'Keal Harry, you can say other guys like Laquan Treadwell, like there's been some other Corey Davis to a degree, he was okay, but Denzel Mims, like there's some bigger body guys that ended up not being great players, obviously, because we need to be careful with the big body pass catcher thing in today's game, right? Because again, contested catches get a lot more difficult. So if you're talking about a guy that is just a dude that's going to win consistently in the air, that's a little bit of a cautionary tale. But the reason that I also like Tetairoa McMillan, it sounds like you might like him a little bit more than me, but I still
I
like
think
him a
so.
ton, is because he is a very good route runner. He is, for a guy that is listed at 6'5" and 210 pounds, you would think that he'd be a power explosive guy, but he's not. He's a smooth, sleek kind of mover, right? Like he gets in and out of breaks exceptionally well. He understands how to plant and how to attack blind spots. He has a little bit of a smaller man's game as a route runner, as a technician before the catch. But then the thing that you see, I don't even care about the contested catches that much, because you're right, he does have those on film where he's able to win above the rim. But it's even as simple as a deep in cut where the ball is maybe a foot or two, a little bit too high, and he's able to just extend, show that catch radius, and win outside of his frame with incredible hand strength, man. Like, I really like the intermediate upside of this young man, running deep ins, running deep outs, running comebacks, that big frame to win outside and to be able to fend off opposing defensive backs' bodies as well. That, I think, has tremendous upside here, right? I think that is a big thing that I really do like. So yeah, he can win the contested catches, but he can do the little things, and he is consistently plays outside of his frame as a pass catcher. Nothing gets into his chest, nothing gets into his body. He's incredibly clean as a receiver, which I think is a very impressive thing to talk about.
It's almost lazy to say this for it's almost lazy to say this for a big receiver, what their weakness is. And you can probably guess where I'm going with this, because it's the same thing that get brought up with Drake London.
He's not fast.
Yeah, the long speed. I'm curious.
It's okay. Yeah. It's like, it's fine. Yeah.
It's something that is going to get over-evaluated, and it got over-evaluated for Keon Coleman. Everyone was saying, oh my God, he ran in the 4.5s. Okay, he doesn't. That's a fast time for Keon Coleman.
4.61. But yeah.
Was he a 4.61? I thought he was low 4.5s.
4.61. I think he ran 4.5 some at his pro day if he ran it there. But yeah, 4.61. Yeah.
McMillan's probably going to be in the 4.6s because he's bigger than Keon Coleman. He's about the same size as Drake London. He's a big dude.
4.58 to 4.62 estimated, somewhere in that ballpark. Yeah, I'd be on there.
He's not going to run a 4.7, but you can see that it takes him a little bit to get going. And, it takes him a bit to get to the top end speed, and there's really not much of a top gear. That's what the concern is going to be with him, and I'm making note of that. That's one thing in summer scouting that he's probably not going to fix. That's not something that's going to change in an offseason, that he's going to suddenly become faster in this period of time. So that's probably the only really glaring thing for me, because everything else he does, he plays the role that he needs to play, the X jump ball, secure possession receiver role. He plays that extremely well. He just doesn't have that top gear, and that might hurt him in creating separation on some of his deeper routes.
You'll hear me talk about this with running backs, but I think it's the same here in this scenario, in this occasion, right? Is that some players are just one gear players, right? They play constantly at this speed, which is a good speed, but then when they have to separate vertically or down the field, that second oomph, that second pop to be able to separate from the corner last second, just doesn't really have that, right? So the big question here, Joe, and it's not a bad thing necessarily. People think of this as a bad thing, but I don't think it's a bad thing. Does he have enough speed to separate consistently outside, or is he a guy that has to play a lot of big slot at the next level, which I think is going to be some people's question marks, right? And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that whether you're a big slot or you're an outside receiver, depending on where your offense structures and runs, both can be very valuable. I will say this, the one thing that holds Tetairoa McMillan back for me as far as a full evaluation, though, is me, my bias, right? My bias is that I value players that can do more, right? So I value a guy that can play multiple spots of a wide receiver. That can play all three spots as a wide receiver. I'm not sure if McMillan is that guy. McMillan might be a big slot at the next level, which, again, there's nothing wrong with that. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a slot in the NFL, and that's all he plays. Doesn't stop him from catching over 100 passes a year and over 1,000 yards, right? Like, that's still incredibly valuable. Keenan Allen's the same way. These guys are still slot receivers, but what I'm saying is that there's a separator between a good and great receiving prospect and a great and elite receiving prospect for guys that can line up and be a little bit versatile as far as be able to align across a formation. So that's the only thing that's going to hold McMillan back for me personally, because I do have questions. Can I throw him into the boundary and him beat one-on-one coverage consistently? I have questions about that. As a big slot receiver, I got no questions about that, man. He could run routes. He can finish through contact. He plays with great hand strength, great physicality. He can do that work. Can he do the other stuff? That's the biggest thing I'll be watching this year for Tetairoa McMillan. Can he play outside consistently, and can he win consistently outside?
And with that in mind, I have a mid to late first round on him, but I think it's probably very likely that he ends up going in the beginning of the second round, just because of the track record of these types of guys. Other players are going to emerge ahead of him. There's a lot of speed, man. There's a lot of speed in this receiver class that's going to get pushed up ahead of him. He's probably going to go in the beginning of the second round, but I have a late first on him as my grade.
It's interesting how some guys rise and fall a little bit, right? Like Keon Coleman runs a little bit slower. He falls into the first pick of the second round or first pick of the second rounds. But then Drake London was the first wide receiver taken in his draft, right? And he's kind of a similar profile. So he was a top 10 pick. So it's very interesting just to see how development happens. But I think the one thing that Tetairoa McMillan does have working for him, again, I still need to get through a bunch of guys in the wide receiver class, Joe, but I'll be honest.
It's not a very good class.
It's not knocking my socks off right now, dude. Like, there's not a lot of wow dudes for me right now. So maybe he's going to be good and he'll rise up the board just naturally because of the supply demand thing, right? I mean, that's always possible, right? For me, I have a firm second round grade on him right now with work to go here. I think that this kid is a legit top 50 player, no doubt today. Can he rise to be a first rounder? No doubt for me. I think it's possible, but I still need some of those concerns to be answered potentially. Can he win outside? That is the question I need him to answer this year.
To really quick thought on the receiver class before we wrap here. I think that one thing that's really interesting is the amount of guys, not only that have transferred, but there's a lot of smaller program and lower level athletes that statistically were some of the best in the country that transferred. So I'm talking about LeJonte Wester, who's now at Colorado, Chris Mitchell, who's now at Notre Dame, Colin Lacey, who's now at Louisville. There's like a good grouping of guys that are kind of question marks that we don't totally know what they're going to be until they get to face real, true, better competition.
I mean, even I know it's not exactly what you were going for there for like a G5 moving up, but like I would even put like a Deion Burks in there, right?
Well,
like
that was why I phrased it the way that I did, is that there were some of these guys that were at lower level P5s too that moved up.
But even a Deion Burks, who was very good at Purdue last year, I mean, you're going to have to be fighting for targets now at Oklahoma with Andrell Anthony and Nick Anderson and those dudes as well. So I'm just saying, man, it's not like a foregone conclusion that he's wide receiver one of that offense. It's not a foregone conclusion. We can do that all we want, but he's not
wide receiver one. He is the wide receiver in that offense. Relax, he's going to have an elite season. Draft him first overall. At Joe DeLeone at Rise and Draft. Folks, thanks for tuning in. Hit the subscribe button, leave us a 5-star review, and we will talk to you later. BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.